Hello and welcome to another video on the Life After Brady channel. Inspired by the recent Michael Jordan Last Dance documentary, we're going to take a look at whether Tom Brady could make his own Last Dance documentary. With news of him coming out with an ESPN documentary, we're going to look specifically at the Last Dance compared to how that would play with Brady's career and life, and what the similarities and differences are, and kind of go from there. Here's the main topics we're going to cover. First of all, their pro career. I mean, kind of similar but different. 1984 to 1998, 13 years. For Jordan versus Brady, plays for 20 years so far with the Patriots, which is what it would most likely be about. You could include this Buck stuff. The peak is one of the big differences. You know, Jordan's got two three-peats, really a 6-year stretch. There obviously is that baseball stuff in there, but not extensively. Brady, the problem, he's got 3 peaks. You know, 01 to 04, he wins the 3 titles. 07 to 11, you know, he's an NFL MVP. They go 16-0 in that stretch, and then 14 to 18, they win 3 out of 4 Super Bowls. So pretty big stretches to either ignore or have to include all of. Another big thing, you know, the first 2 to 3 episodes focused around main characters of Coach Phil Jackson, Scottie Pippen, and Dennis Rodman. How does that play for the Patriots? You know, basketball is just such a smaller game of, you know, you got 5 guys on the floor, 12 guys on a roster, versus the Patriots, you know, it's 53 guys in much shorter careers. You know, Scottie and Phil were with Jordan for his whole career versus, you know, no Patriot has been able to last with Brady that long. You know, the closest probably Stephen Gostkowski, which you're not going to focus on the kicker. As I say that, you're obviously going to have a lot about Adam Vinatieri in there, because without Vinatieri's kicks against the Raiders, Panthers, Rams, you know, Brady isn't what Brady is. So really hard to, you know, isolate characters the way they did in The Last Dance. The branding is a huge part of it. You know, Air Jordan, you know, Jordan's a billionaire. He was a global icon, created a shoe, clothing designer, you know, a whole brand. Brady has his own brand, but it's such a different thing. You know, TB12 is a performance enhancing lifestyle. Everyone can wear a pair of sneakers. Not everyone's not going to eat tomatoes and do band work and not have alcohol. It's just such a less relatable item, but it's also key to his success. So it's obviously going to come up. Another key difference: the families. You know, the big thing about the Jordan documentary, his family was basically left out of it. First, Brady, family is a key part of his career, especially the last 10 years. You know, he obviously has a child with Bridget Moynihan. Really would focus Giselle would be my guess, but you're going to have a lot of Giselle. You know, her comments in the Super Bowl of, he can't catch his own passes, you know, in the Giants loss. Obviously, he stepped away from OTAs the last couple of years with the Patriots because, you know, he needed to focus on his family. Family's obviously a very important part of his life. That's why he did the Facebook documentary. So that will obviously be in there, which will take up more time than what, you know, Jordan's zero family time did. Another key thing is just the differences in the NBA and NFL. It took so little to set up the rivalries, I would say, in the NBA documentary. Everyone knows Charles Barkley. Everyone knows the Jazz. The Dream Team is, you know, world famous. Everyone knows those guys, you know, Magic and Larry. So you don't have to take time to set up those guys. I think it'd be much harder for Tom because, A, you have Peyton Manning, which Peyton doesn't take time to set up, but you kind of can't tell the Tom story without the Peyton story. You know, they're key to their success all the way from 01 to 15 when Peyton retires. So how do you set up the Jets rivalry? How do you set up, Phillip Rivers is in the NFC the whole time, but, you know, never challenges them, but, you know, it's a legitimate, you know, guy who he plays in the playoffs. You go to the Steelers. Steelers are obviously the second most successful team probably during Brady's stretch, but only win once, and not while Tom's really winning in 06, I believe. So that would be hard. So that's what we're going to talk about here and get into a little bit more. So the pro careers are really, really hard. Obviously, the documentary for Jordan focused on the 6 key championship seasons, and then they sprinkled in a little bit of the North Carolina days, sprinkled in the God is Michael Jordan, God is Michael Jordan for the Celtics in '86, and then the Detroit Pistons, Bad Boy Pistons. That was a key part of it. Where do you pick and choose for Brady? To me, you probably ignore basically 2005 through 2013 because you're going to want to show the championships. But obviously, you know, the 16-0, the 2 Giants losses, and then kind of rebuilding, you know, so much of what they did 2010, 2009, through 13 is what set up the latter part of the success. And how do you set that up so that it tells the story of the Seahawks through Rams Super Bowls? To me, and I'll talk about this later, I think you focus on 14 through 18 would be my thought process, but kind of hard to do. And then just kind of fitting guys in there. There were only 12 guys in a basketball team, so there's only a certain amount of people that could talk. You go on ESPN, NFL Network nowadays, it seems like half the Patriots from this time period are on there. You then go to the local Boston sports stations, even more are on there with Fourier and all those guys. So plenty of guys willing to talk for the Brady documentary. It just to me would be too much, so you'd really have to boil it down to much less. Would be my thought process there. I think next the issue is the peaks. They pretty much ignored 84 through 91, which Jordan was obviously very good. Led the league in scoring. He's an all-star many times over, but he doesn't start winning the MVPs really till 91. He wins his second MVP and then wins 4 in the next 7 years or so. I think you'd have to do that with Brady as well, and that's why, to me, you probably ignore 01 through 13, even though 2 key stretches where he wins 3 Super Bowls and then is an offensive force from 07 to 11. So you're ignoring 2 of his MVPs. It's really hard to picture you doing that, but I think that's what you have to do in the documentary. The other thing is just the key characters. I touched on this already, are the rotations of guys. The biggest thing I would also say is the Phil versus Bill Belichick. They're both quiet guys, so you have that going for you. Phil obviously went on to have the Lakers' success. So Phil's a great coach because of what he did with the Bulls and the Lakers. It's really hard, and as we know, we hear the debate every day of whether it's Brady or Belichick. It's really hard to tell the Brady story without Belichick, and that's why you're going to see a lot more, I think, Brady's perspective or Brady's insight into things, because it is a team game. Obviously, the Patriots won those games. Patriots won those Super Bowls more so to me than the Bulls won those games. Jordan won those games more than Phil won those games, I guess how I would say it. And obviously, any documentary I think Belichick has to be involved in, but it's just really hard to differentiate those levels of success. And you heard Phil kind of have a couple of comments about how he didn't love the Jordan documentary. It was clearly Jordan's perspective. I think you'd see the same thing with the Brady documentary in any ways. Next is the Brandon family. Air Jordan, everyone knows it. Jordan nowadays is almost known more for that, the Jordan brand, than his basketball playing days. That's part of why the documentary came out, so that people could remember how good he was. I think that contrast with Brady, that the TB12, it just, and Bill Simmons has talked about this a lot of, the in the wrong hands. These are just infomercials. These are just commercials for these guys. And the TB12 stuff, I just really get concerned. And it obviously has been successful, but I get concerned that it will just take over the documentary. No one's had this success later on in their career like Brady. So obviously his TB12 method and what he's done off the field in order to help his body and recover has been phenomenal. It's vitally important. But I would hope that they would focus more on just the competitive nature. Kind of how Jordan... They talked about the competitive nature, obviously a lot. In the Jordan documentary, the competitive nature gets talked about with gambling a lot. I would hope that they shift away from that with Brady. Obviously, Brady does a little bit of that, but not nearly what Jordan does. And then the branding, Brady's rich, Brady's famous. He's a millionaire. Michael Jordan's a billionaire. $2.1 billion is what I saw. Brady's very famous, but more of his success to me is on the field versus Jordan off the field. So it'll be interesting to see that. And the family stuff is interesting. Jordan left it out entirely. Brady obviously would not. I think Giselle is a key part of his career and the key part of the latter part of his success. I'd be curious though if you do a Last Dance type of documentary. You're not focusing on the games entirely. You do a little bit more of Brady the person. Giselle, to me, clearly wants him to retire and wanted him to retire several years ago. So I think you'd see an interesting contrast there of what sort of comments get in there about, we wanted Tom to retire, we knew it was the end. versus he wanted to keep playing. I think you got a potential there of him hanging on too long. As I said, the Jordan documentary had a lot better chance of just kind of going with it. Everyone knows the NBA players from the '90s; they're so much more recognizable. Charles Barkley on TV. The Jazz are obviously very successful. Isaiah Thomas has still stayed in the mainstream media. So you were able to, Magic Larry, you were able to just kind of like mention these guys and keep moving. I don't think you'd be able to do that as much in the Brady documentary, with the exception of Peyton. And that's where, to me, is it Peyton the whole time? Do you mix Peyton in here and there? It'd be really hard to write that story. For me, I would really recommend for The Last Dance for Brady to focus on really 14 through 18 and really focusing on the playoffs. You don't have to me, the NFL write about the regular season, and they sprinkled it in. Not a ton, but obviously The Last Dance. Pippen sits out the first part of that season. Rodman's off his rocker. I don't think in a documentary of The Last Dance you'd do Brady's final season where they lose to the Titans. I don't think you do a combination of the last season of the Titans and then the previous season where they win the Super Bowl. It just kind of be weird. So to me, you'd focus on the last four, 2014 through 2018, where they win the 3 Super Bowls. 2014, the numbers are just incredible that first year. 2 games in the playoffs, over 300 yards, throws for 4 touchdowns in the Super Bowl. I forget if he wins the MVP there. I believe he does, but 28 points, pretty successful. The following year, Steven Gostkowski missed extra point in a failed 2-point conversion away from beating Peyton, and I think it cannot be underappreciated enough that if they beat Peyton, they win the Super Bowl. I forget exactly who the Broncos won last year, but obviously Peyton wasn't a part of it. With rubber arm at that point, he couldn't throw for anything. So that's a key loss. And then the Falcons game is really the crowning achievement. 466 yards, obviously down 28-3. Everyone knows it, and it'll be very interesting in the documentary because that to me is. It's one of the greatest games in Super Bowl history. It's one of the most unlikely. It's really, to me, and I said it a little earlier, it's a crowning achievement of when everyone's like, okay, this is it. This is the guy. He's there. He's at the age of 37, 38, I believe, and he brings a miraculous comeback back. And then the next 2 years, kind of a little bit for different reasons. 17, they obviously lose the Super Bowl. Nick Foles and the Eagles are just magical, but it's not because of Brady. No interceptions, 505 yards, 3 touchdowns. Absolutely kicking butt, taking names. Very impressive. And then 2018, they beat the Rams. Not as impressive a game. No touchdowns, held under 300 yards, but when they needed it, they would win. And I think in the Last Dance theme, this is one that you could probably say he would age gracefully, beating Patrick Mahomes in the Arrowhead. Obviously, the thing with overtime is lingering out there. They win the toss, they go down and score. But they remember that fourth quarter, they used Edelman to get down the field. He throws for 348 yards, so it wasn't just the defense obviously doing that. I think that'd be an interesting one to set up, and that's how I would play The Last Dance. Focus on those years. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like or comment, and thank you for joining us today.